Before today's documentary begins, a message from our completely fictional sponsor, the Gotham Villain Career Counseling Center. Are you a Gotham criminal suffering from career confusion? Maybe you've spent 20 years leaving riddles at crime scenes, and somehow you're still surprised when Batman figures out where you live. Maybe you built an entire criminal empire around umbrellas. Maybe your business plan is simply set building on fire, repeat. Listen, Piscine, everybody needs direction. That's why there's the Gotham Villain Career Counseling Center. At GVCC, we help Gotham's most dramatically unemployed citizens turn completely irrational obsessions into sustainable criminal careers. Our trained counselors offer Riddler Resume assistance. Stop writing 12-page riddles just to tell Batman you robbed a bank. Try LinkedIn. Penguin Small Business Consulting. Because if your nightclub gets raided by Batman 6 times a month, technically you have a management problem. Two-Face decision-making workshops. Should you attend? Heads, yes. Tails. Also yes. We already charged your card. Scarecrow pharmaceutical compliance training. Apparently spraying experimental fear chemicals into the subway is considered a regulatory issue. Who knew? Poison Ivy Landscaping Services certification. Turn your murderous botanical obsession into something society actually needs. Have you seen what landscapers charge now? You could be rich without strangling anybody with a vine. Mr. Freeze HVAC Repair School. Victor, sweetheart, you already understand refrigeration better than half the contractors in New Jersey. We're trying to help you here. Bain Chiropractic Services. And now, back to the Pizzaverse, where Gotham's criminals are about to discover the most terrifying weapon Batman ever possessed. A documentary narrator with receipts, specializing in aggressive spinal adjustments. Insurance absolutely does not cover this. Calendar Man event planning. Birthdays. Anniversaries. Weddings. Federal holidays. For once, Julian, use the damn calendar for something normal. And introducing our most popular program, Joker Corporate Team Building. Actually, no. Legal told us absolutely not. We tried one seminar. Accounting still hasn't come back. So whether you're a disgraced psychiatrist, chemically enhanced mercenary, emotionally unstable district attorney, homicidal botanist, immortal eco-terrorist, or a grown man taking orders from a wooden gangster puppet, the Gotham Villain Career Counseling Center believes there's a productive place for you in society. Probably. Call today. Operators are standing by. Except Arkham residents. You people need to ask permission before using the phone. The Gotham Villain Career Counseling Center. Because maybe crime isn't your destiny. Maybe you just need a decent resume. The Gotham Villain Career Counseling Center is completely fictional and is not affiliated with Batman, Gotham City, Wayne Enterprises, Arkham Asylum, DC Comics, any psychiatric institution, or any guy dressed like a bat who somehow has enough free time to punch 40 people every night.
Disclaimer. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer for the lawyers, the comic book historians, and that one guy already typing "actually" in all caps. This video is created for commentary, criticism, historical discussion, analysis, satire, and entertainment purposes. Batman the Joker, Catwoman, Harley Quinn, Two-Face, the Penguin, the Riddler, Bane, and all other referenced characters, names, stories, and related intellectual property belong to their respective copyright and trademark owners. The Pizzaverse does not claim ownership of any third-party characters, artwork, footage, or comic book material discussed in this documentary. Comic continuity is also a beautiful flaming dumpster with approximately 70 years of retcons, alternate universes, reboots, deaths, resurrections, rewritten origins, and writers occasionally looking at the previous canon and saying, "Nah, forget all that." So when we discuss a character's origin, motivation, powers, or history, we are talking about major published interpretations, not declaring that one version is carved into the Batcave wall by decree of Bruce Wayne himself. This documentary does not glorify murder, organized crime, terrorism, psychological manipulation, arson, poisoning, breaking Batman's spine, controlling people with hats, or solving personal disagreements by releasing everybody from Arkham Asylum. Seriously. That last one is a terrible conflict resolution strategy. Any psychological terminology used here is for discussion of fictional characters in storytelling. We are not diagnosing real people, fictional billionaires, murderous clowns, sentient puppets, homicidal botanists, or anybody currently arguing about which Joker was best. And finally, if your favorite Batman villain was described differently in comic issue number 437, Volume 3, Earth Whatever, published during a lunar eclipse in 1987. Congratulations. You probably know more Batman continuity than the rest of us. Please use that power responsibly. Now grab the cape, lock the Arkham doors, and welcome to Gotham. This is the Pizzaverse. And we do not miss
Batman's Rogues Gallery. The psychology, tragedy, and madness behind Gotham's greatest villains. A Pizzaverse Studios documentary. A Palermo Productions original. Written by Bambi Palermo. Narrated by Vincent Vinny Di Prio. Produced by Pizzaverse Studios and Palermo Productions. Gotham City has never had a shortage of criminals. But Batman's enemies are something else entirely. These aren't just bank robbers wearing funny costumes. They are fallen prosecutors, disgraced scientists, crime bosses, assassins, environmental extremists, obsessive geniuses, professional killers, immortal fanatics, traumatized survivors, and at least one grown man taking criminal orders from a wooden puppet. Which, by Gotham standards, barely cracks the top 10 weirdest things happening before lunch. For more than 80 years, Batman's Rogues Gallery has become one of the most recognizable collections of villains in popular culture. And the reason isn't simply because they look interesting. The greatest Batman villains represent something. Fear, chaos, duality, obsession, grief, control, identity, revenge, the desperate need to be respected, and sometimes the dangerous belief that you are the smartest person in every room you enter. Batman himself is built around trauma, discipline, and control. His enemies often reflect those same forces after they have been twisted in another direction. Harvey Dent believed in justice until Two-Face surrendered his choices to a coin. Jonathan Crane studied fear until fear became his weapon. Victor Fries loved his wife so completely that saving her became more important than everything and everyone around him. Edward Nygma wants recognition. Oswald Cobblepot wants respect. Ra's al Ghul wants to save the world by destroying a significant portion of the people living in it. And then there's the Joker. The one man who seems perfectly comfortable explaining absolutely nothing. Batman spends his life trying to impose order on Gotham. The Joker laughs at the idea that order ever existed. And somewhere between those two extremes sits an entire city filled with people who have turned wounds, obsessions, philosophies, and bad decisions into identities. Tonight, we are going inside Batman's Rogues Gallery. Not simply looking at what these villains do, but at who they are, where they came from, what drives them, why they keep returning, and why some of them have remained fascinating for generations, while others needed one brilliant writer to rescue them from the comic book bargain bin. From the Joker and Two-Face, to Catwoman, Bane, Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn, Mr. Freeze, Scarecrow, Clayface, Black Mask, Deadshot, Ra's al Ghul, and the rest of Gotham's deeply dysfunctional alumni association. This is the history behind the masks, the tragedies behind the gimmicks, and the psychology behind some of the greatest villains ever created. Welcome to Gotham. Keep your valuables close. Do not accept free samples from Scarecrow. And for the love of God, if a man in a question mark suit leaves you an envelope, don't open the damn thing. This is Batman's Rogues Gallery, the psychology, tragedy, and madness behind Gotham's greatest villains. The Joker. He is Batman's most iconic enemy, a criminal with no single definitive origin, no clear motivation, and no fixed identity. He first appeared in 1940 in the very first issue of Batman's solo comic series, and he was originally intended to die at the end of his debut story. That plan was abandoned, and the character went on to become one of the most recognizable villains in all of fiction. What makes him genuinely unsettling is that he appears to operate without conventional rules. Most criminals want money, power, revenge, or control. The Joker often seems to want nothing except disorder. He has been portrayed as a gangster, a prankster, a terrorist, and a philosopher of chaos, with each interpretation adding something different without completely erasing the others. His relationship with Batman is the central tension of his mythology. The Joker often sees their conflict as a kind of partnership, even a relationship that gives both of them purpose. That idea alone disturbs Batman more deeply than almost any individual crime could. Two-Face. He was Gotham's district attorney. Harvey Dent before mobster Sal Maroni threw acid into his face during a courtroom confrontation. The physical disfigurement contributed to a psychological collapse, and the man who had dedicated his life to justice became obsessed with duality and chance. He makes many of his decisions by flipping a scarred coin, allowing fate to determine whether he acts with mercy or cruelty. What gives the character weight is where Harvey begins. He was one of Batman and Commissioner Gordon's strongest allies, a man who genuinely believed Gotham could be saved through the law. His fall, therefore, feels like a failure of Gotham's institutions as much as a personal tragedy. The coin is more than a gimmick. It allows Harvey to surrender responsibility, letting something outside himself choose between the conflicting sides of his identity. The Penguin. He is one of Batman's oldest recurring villains. Introduced in 1941, and he has survived decades of changing tastes by constantly shifting between comedy and menace. Oswald Cobblepot is traditionally portrayed as a short, heavy-set man obsessed with wealth, class, and the social status he believes the world denied him. In many modern interpretations, he becomes a sophisticated crime lord who operates behind the facade of legitimate business, often using nightclubs, restaurants, or other establishments as fronts for criminal operations. Unlike many of Batman's enemies, Penguin is generally not portrayed as psychologically detached from reality. He is calculating, passionate, ambitious, and intensely status-conscious. His famous umbrellas frequently conceal weapons or elaborate gadgets, while his obsession with birds reinforces the identity he has built around himself. The character often works best when written as someone who desperately wants respect and has built an entire criminal empire trying to force Gotham to give it to him. The Riddler. He cannot stop himself from leaving clues. Edward Nygma, sometimes spelled Edward Nygma, depending on the continuity, is a man consumed by the need to prove that he is the smartest person in the room. He does this by challenging Batman with elaborate puzzles, riddles, codes, and intellectual traps. He first appeared in 1948. His obsession is often portrayed as more than simple arrogance. In many interpretations, it functions almost like a compulsion. He struggles to commit a crime without leaving some kind of intellectual signature behind. That flaw is also his defining quality. He is rarely interested in money or power purely for their own sake. What he truly wants is acknowledgement. He needs Batman to engage with his mind. And because of that, somewhere beneath all the arrogance, the Riddler frequently designs crimes that give Batman exactly what he needs to catch him. Catwoman. She is one of the most morally complicated figures in Batman's world. Selina Kyle is primarily a thief rather than a traditional supervillain, and her relationship with Batman has always existed in a moral gray area that few other characters occupy. She first appeared in 1940 as a mysterious jewel thief, known simply as the Cat. Her background has been rewritten repeatedly over the decades, ranging from versions involving high society to grittier interpretations that place Selina in Gotham's East End, where she learned to survive through intelligence, independence, and whatever means were available to her. She and Batman are genuinely attracted to one another, and that tension has driven some of the most interesting stories in the mythology. Selina does not fit neatly into the category of villain. She steals, but she also has her own code. She has saved lives, protected vulnerable people, and fought criminals far worse than herself. Her presence repeatedly forces Batman and the audience to confront an uncomfortable question. What separates a criminal from someone who simply refuses to obey rules they believe are unjust? Bane. He was born inside a prison. His father was a revolutionary who escaped the authorities of the fictional Caribbean nation of Santa Prisca. Unable to punish the father, the government forced his young son to serve the sentence in his place. Bane grew up within the brutal walls of Peña Duro prison, educating himself through whatever books he could obtain while developing his body and mind through extraordinary discipline. When prison officials began testing an experimental drug called Venom, Bane became one of its most powerful surviving subjects. In many versions, the drug is administered through a system of tubes and greatly increases his physical strength, though later interpretations have changed the details of how he uses it. He arrived in Gotham in 1993, having already deduced that Batman was Bruce Wayne. His strategy was devastating. Rather than simply challenging Batman to a fight, Bane engineered a massive breakout at Arkham Asylum, forcing Batman to spend days battling escaped criminals until he was physically and mentally exhausted. Then Bane confronted Bruce Wayne at Wayne Manor, and he broke Batman's back. Bane was not simply a thug with enormous muscles. He defeated Batman because he understood him. He studied him, exhausted him, and attacked only when Batman had almost nothing left. Ra's al Ghul. He has lived for centuries in many interpretations of the character. Ra's al Ghul first appeared in 1971 as part of an effort to expand Batman's world beyond the streets of Gotham. His name roughly translates from Arabic as Head of the Demon, and he commands a vast international network that has been known by several names across different continuities, most famously the League of Assassins. Ra's prolongs his life through the Lazarus Pits, mysterious chemical pools capable of restoring health, reversing aging, and in some stories even reviving the recently dead. The process can also cause temporary madness or extreme instability. His goal is not conventional villainy. Ra's genuinely believes that human civilization is destroying the planet, and he views drastic population reduction as a necessary means of restoring environmental balance. The concern is recognizable. The solution is horrifying. He also respects Batman deeply, considers him one of the few people worthy of succeeding him, and has repeatedly attempted to convince Bruce Wayne to become his heir. That admiration makes him different from many of Batman's enemies. Ra's does not simply want to destroy Batman. He wants Batman to agree with him. Poison Ivy. Pamela Isley is a botanist whose connection to plant life becomes extraordinary after scientific experimentation and exposure to dangerous chemicals, toxins, or other transformative forces, depending on the continuity. She develops immunity to many poisons and toxins, an unusual biological connection to plants, and in many versions the ability to manipulate vegetation directly. She can also produce powerful pheromones and toxins capable of influencing or incapacitating humans. Poison Ivy first appeared in 1966. Earlier versions of the character often emphasized her seductive qualities and botanical gimmicks. Later writers increasingly centered her environmental ideology. She views humanity as dangerously destructive and often considers plant life more deserving of protection than human civilization. Her crimes frequently involve ecological destruction, corporate exploitation, pollution, or threats to the natural world. What gives Ivy a different quality from many villains is that the problem she identifies is often real. It is her willingness to murder, manipulate, or destroy people in the name of solving it that turns her into something far more dangerous. Harley Quinn. She began as a character created specifically for Batman, the animated series in 1992. Harley Quinn was originally conceived as the Joker's sidekick, But the character became so popular that DC quickly expanded her role, bringing her into the comics and eventually incorporating her into mainstream DC continuity. Dr. Harleen Quinzel was a psychiatrist working at Arkham Asylum who became fascinated with the Joker during their sessions. That fascination developed into an abusive and destructive relationship. She eventually helped him escape, adopted the Harley Quinn identity, and became his devoted accomplice. What made her compelling was the tragedy underneath the comedy. Harleen was an intelligent, educated woman whose judgment and identity became consumed by a manipulative relationship. Over time, particularly after separating from the Joker, Harley developed into a far more independent character. She formed friendships, developed her own moral code, and increasingly moved from outright villain toward anti-hero. Her transformation from disposable sidekick to one of DC's most prominent independent characters is one of the more remarkable evolutions in modern comic book history. Mr. Freeze. He is one of the few Batman villains whose modern origin is genuinely sympathetic. Victor Fries is a brilliant cryogenics expert whose wife, Nora, is dying from a terminal illness. Desperate to preserve her until a cure can be found, he places her in cryogenic suspension. An accident leaves Fries unable to survive outside extremely cold temperatures, forcing him to live inside a specialized refrigerated suit. He turns to crime largely to finance his research and preserve his chance of someday curing Nora. Mr. Freeze had existed for decades before this interpretation, originally appearing as a far more gimmicky villain. Then Batman. The animated series changed everything. The 1992 episode Heart of Ice gave Freeze his tragic backstory and helped permanently redefine the character. The episode received an Emmy Award for its writing. Freeze does not necessarily crave power. He does not always enjoy what he does. At his best, he is written as a grieving man who has lost almost everything and has reduced his entire existence to a single impossible mission: save Nora, no matter what it costs. Scarecrow. He uses fear as a weapon. Jonathan Crane is a psychologist whose fascination with fear becomes increasingly obsessive. In many versions, his experiments become so extreme that they cost him his academic career. Crane then turns his research toward criminal applications, developing fear toxins capable of forcing victims into terrifying hallucinations based on their deepest fears. He first appeared in 1941. For years, Scarecrow remained a relatively minor Batman villain, but later writers explored the psychological possibilities of the character more seriously. He is rarely physically imposing. That is part of the point. Crane compensates for physical weakness by weaponizing terror itself. His obsession is also often deeply personal. Many versions portray Crane as an awkward, isolated child who endured bullying and humiliation. His entire adult existence then becomes an attempt to understand, control, and ultimately inflict the emotion that once controlled him. The Mad Hatter. He builds his criminal identity around the world of Lewis Carroll. Jervis Tetch is generally portrayed as an eccentric scientist or neuroscientist with an all-consuming fixation on Alice's adventures in Wonderland. He develops technology capable of manipulating human behavior, usually through neural implants, hypnotic devices, or specialized headwear. Mind control becomes his primary weapon. The character was introduced in 1948 and has gone through numerous interpretations. His crimes frequently recreate characters, situations, and imagery from Carroll's stories, often using unwilling victims whom Tetch has forced into specific roles. Beneath the colorful Wonderland imagery lies something deeply disturbing. In several interpretations, his obsession with Alice becomes attached to a real woman or girl whom he attempts to force into the fantasy he has constructed. The whimsy is merely decoration. Underneath it is control. Clayface. The name Clayface belongs to several different characters. The original Clayface appeared in 1940 as Basil Carlo, a horror film actor who became enraged when one of his classic movies was remade without him. He adopted the identity of one of the film's villains and began committing murders connected to the production. Later comics introduced entirely different characters using the Clayface name. One of the most significant was Matt Hagen, a treasure hunter who encountered a strange substance that transformed his body and gave him the ability to reshape himself into virtually any form. Basil Carlo eventually gained similar shape-shifting powers. That ability makes Clayface a uniquely dangerous enemy. He can copy faces, imitate appearances, disguise himself as almost anyone, and vanish into a crowd. There is also something tragic about the character in his more thoughtful interpretations. Behind the monster is often a person who has lost ownership of his own face. He can look like anyone, except sometimes himself. Killer Croc. Waylon Jones has a rare physical condition that causes his skin and body to develop increasingly reptilian characteristics. Different continuities portray the exact nature of his condition differently, with some versions remaining relatively grounded and others transforming him into something far more monstrous. Jones grows up surrounded by cruelty, rejection, and exploitation because of his appearance. In several versions, he becomes a carnival performer before drifting into crime and eventually arriving in Gotham. His intelligence varies dramatically depending on the writer. Some portray Croc as nearly feral. Others portray him as intelligent, articulate, and painfully aware of how society sees him. The most compelling versions acknowledge an uncomfortable truth. Waylon was treated like a monster long before he began behaving like one. Gotham's cruelty helped create Killer Croc just as surely as his biology did. Black Mask. Roman Sionis builds his cruelty on top of inherited wealth. Born into one of Gotham's wealthy families, Roman grows up surrounded by people obsessed with appearances, status, and social performance. He develops a profound hatred for what he sees as the false masks worn by polite society. After inheriting his family's cosmetics company and eventually losing control of much of his fortune and status, Roman descends into criminality. He adopts a black mask carved from material associated with his family's coffin, with the exact details varying somewhat between versions. He eventually becomes one of Gotham's most ruthless organized crime figures. Black Mask is particularly associated with intimidation, sadism, torture, and maintaining power through fear. What distinguishes him from many Gotham crime bosses is the philosophy he builds around identity. Roman claims to hate false faces, yet he spends his life hiding behind one. Victor Sash. He keeps a record of every life he takes. Victor Sash carves a tally mark into his own skin for each person he murders, covering his body with scars that serve as a physical record of his crimes. He was introduced in 1992 as a relatively grounded Batman villain. No supernatural powers. No elaborate costume. No freeze gun, fear toxin, or chemically enhanced strength. Just a deeply disturbed killer and his weapon. His backstory involves losing his fortune through gambling and reaching a point of complete despair. After a confrontation with another man, Josh develops a nihilistic belief system in which he convinces himself that human lives are meaningless. He comes to believe that killing people somehow frees them from existence. The reasoning is horrifyingly broken, but it is internally consistent to him. That consistency is what makes him so unnerving. Hugo Strange. He predates nearly every major Batman villain. Professor Hugo Strange first appeared in 1940, less than a year after Batman himself debuted. That makes him one of the earliest recurring antagonists in Batman mythology. Strange is a brilliant psychiatrist, psychologist, scientist, or some combination of the three, depending on the continuity. What remains consistent is his pathological fixation on Batman. He became one of the earliest villains to uncover Batman's secret identity, and that knowledge has repeatedly shaped his role across decades of stories. In some versions, Strange creates monsters. In others, he conducts unethical experiments on patients. But underneath almost every interpretation is obsession. He does not merely hate Batman. He studies him, admires him, dissects him psychologically, and sometimes wants to become him. That makes his fixation more intimate and considerably stranger than ordinary revenge. The ventriloquist. He is one man divided between two identities. Arnold Wesker is usually portrayed as a quiet, timid, soft-spoken man whose suppressed aggression manifests through a gangster puppet named Scarface. Scarface is modeled after a Prohibition-era mobster and speaks with a violent, domineering personality completely unlike Wesker's own. Wesker frequently insists that Scarface is the real criminal and that he himself is merely being controlled. Psychologically, the distinction becomes disturbingly complicated. Wesker is genuinely afraid of the puppet. The character works as dark comedy, but he is also a portrait of fractured identity. Gotham's criminals tend to be theatrical and grandiose. Wesker is meek. Scarface is everything Wesker cannot allow himself to be. And the disturbing realization is that the frightened ventriloquist and the murderous gangster are coming from the same mind. Talia al Ghul. She is the daughter of Ra's al Ghul, and her relationship with Batman has always been shaped by divided loyalties. Talia has genuine feelings for Bruce Wayne, yet she has also spent much of her life tied to her father, his organization, and his worldview. Those loyalties repeatedly collide. Across different eras, Talia has been portrayed as a romantic interest, an ally, a manipulative antagonist, and a powerful independent figure in her own right. At various points, she has commanded her own organizations and pursued goals separate from those of her father. That complexity is what makes her difficult to classify. Talia is not purely villainous in every interpretation, but she has made choices that place her firmly against Batman in many stories. Her relationship with Bruce eventually resulted in Damian Wayne, who became Robin. That connection makes Talia permanently tied to the Wayne family in a way few other antagonists ever become. She is not simply part of Batman's rogues gallery. She is part of Batman's family history. Solomon Grundy. He was once a man who died in a swamp. Cyrus Gold was murdered and left in Slaughter Swamp during the late 19th century. Years later, he emerged from the swamp as an enormous, pale, nearly indestructible creature with little or no memory of the person he had once been. The name Solomon Grundy comes from the old nursery rhyme, which becomes associated with him after his resurrection. He first appeared in 1944 as an enemy of the original Green Lantern, Alan Scott, before eventually becoming associated with Batman and numerous other DC heroes. Grundy dies and returns repeatedly. And depending on the story, each resurrection can produce a somewhat different version of him. Sometimes he is nearly mindless. Sometimes he possesses intelligence and emotional awareness. He is not always evil in the conventional sense. Often, Solomon Grundy feels more like a supernatural force trapped in an endless cycle of death and rebirth. He keeps waking up in a world he barely understands. Firefly. He is an arsonist eventually consumed by the thing he once used merely as a tool. Garfield Lynns was originally portrayed differently in his earliest appearances, but modern interpretations generally depict him as a former special effects expert or technician who develops a pathological obsession with fire. Eventually, the crime becomes secondary. The burning becomes the point. Firefly equips himself with a specialized suit designed to protect him from extreme heat and uses flamethrowers, incendiary weapons, and other devices to unleash destruction across Gotham. He is not among Batman's most famous enemies, but he occupies a very specific place in Gotham's criminal ecosystem. Firefly is driven by compulsion rather than ideology. There is no grand philosophy required, no political revolution, no elaborate moral argument. He burns things because his obsession has swallowed the person he used to be. Gotham has a habit of turning obsessions into identities. Firefly might be one of the clearest examples. A man with a problem who eventually became the problem. Calendar Man. He plans his crimes around dates. Julian Day is a criminal whose schemes are connected to holidays, seasons, manniversaries, or other significant points on the calendar. He first appeared in 1958 and spent decades as one of Batman's more colorful and occasionally ridiculous minor villains. Then, The Long Halloween changed how audiences viewed him. In the 1996 limited series, a mysterious killer commits murders on holidays throughout the year, while Calendar Man sits imprisoned in Arkham Asylum. Batman repeatedly visits him seeking insight. Calendar Man provides cryptic clues, partial answers, and unsettling observations. The role transforms him from a gimmick villain into something resembling a Hannibal Lecter-style consultant. He knows things. He enjoys knowing that Batman needs him. And every answer feels incomplete enough to make you wonder what he deliberately left out. Deadshot. He almost never misses. Floyd Lawton is one of the deadliest marksmen in the DC universe. He first appeared in 1950 as a supposed crime fighter attempting to replace Batman before eventually revealing his criminal intentions. The character largely disappeared for years before later writers reinvented him as a professional assassin and mercenary with a deeply self-destructive personality. Deadshot's accuracy is extraordinary. His reputation is expensive. And in many portrayals, his concern for his own survival is frighteningly limited. That combination makes him unusually dangerous. Most criminals calculate risk partly because they want to live long enough to enjoy whatever they gain. Deadshot often does not operate under that assumption. He exists somewhere between supervillain, assassin, mercenary, and reluctant anti-hero, depending on the story. And the most frightening thing about Floyd Lawton is not that he can hit almost any target. It is how little it may cost him personally to pull the trigger. Batman's Rogues Gallery has survived for more than 80 years because these characters were never just costumes standing around waiting to get punched. At their best, they represent pieces of Batman himself, reflected through a cracked mirror. The Joker is chaos without restraint. Two-Face is justice corrupted by chance. The Riddler is intelligence poisoned by ego. Scarecrow turns fear into control. Mr. Freeze turns grief into obsession. Bane turns discipline into domination. Ra's al Ghul takes an understandable concern and follows it straight over the cliff into extremism. Harley Quinn shows what can happen when identity disappears inside somebody else's manipulation. And Catwoman continues to stand in that uncomfortable gray space where legality and morality are not always the same damn thing. That is why Gotham works. Batman is not fighting random criminals. Again and again, he is fighting distorted versions of questions he struggles with himself. How much control is enough? When does justice become vengeance? Can trauma explain terrible behavior without excusing it? Can someone who has crossed the line ever come back? And perhaps the biggest question of all, what separates Batman from the people he hunts? Sometimes it is his code. Sometimes it is his compassion. Sometimes it is one decision made differently at exactly the right moment. Because Gotham's greatest villains remind us that becoming a monster rarely begins with somebody waking up one Tuesday morning and saying, "You know what? I think I'll dress like a penguin and take over organized crime." There is usually something underneath it. Grief. Fear. Humiliation. Ego. Loss. Obsession. Power. Or one spectacularly unhealthy coping mechanism that nobody addressed before somebody ordered the flamethrower. And that is what makes Batman's Rogues Gallery so enduring. Batman may be the hero, but the villains are often the ones holding up the mirror. And Gotham just keeps replacing the glass.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into the history, psychology, tragedy, and absolute occupational insanity of Gotham's criminal population, subscribe to Bambi Palermo and the Pizzaverse. Around here, we dig into hidden history, organized crime, psychology, old Hollywood, dark fairy tales, strange legends, pop culture, and the stories powerful people would prefer you never examine too closely. So hit the like button. Drop your favorite Batman villain in the comments. And tell me which member of the Rogues Gallery deserves a full Pizzaverse deep dive of their own. Personally, I'm keeping one eye on Calendar Man. Anybody that obsessed with scheduling is either dangerous or running a dentist's office. And finally, thank you to everybody who watches, comments, whenever shares, subscribes, and keeps coming back for these documentaries. Thank you to the real ones. You are the reason the Pizzaverse keeps growing. Digging, questioning, laughing, and occasionally wandering into Gotham City against all reasonable advice. Your support means more than a view count. It means we get to keep building this thing together. Our little corner of the internet where curiosity is encouraged. History gets excavated. Bullshit gets questioned. And no subject is automatically safe just because everybody else stopped looking. Stay sharp. Stay skeptical. Stay authentic. This is the Pizzaverse, where we don't rewrite history. We excavate it.
No, that is not a toy.